What's up, everybody? Wes, Jet Air Knife here with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're doing the 1998 slasher classic, Urban Legend. That's my occupied internet phone line.
Oh, yeah, we're ding, ding.
Yeah, we're doing that because that was something that I hadn't even considered a conversation, a legitimate argument between cohabitants about the idea that they pay for this phone line too. And the idea that you can't check your voicemails because someone is using their computer.
The old school reliance on technologies, dial phones with dials. I've seen these jokes where apparently the younger generation don't know how to use it. Like, I think it was Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. Whether the 3 means anything or not remains I'll leave that up to you. But they run into a house looking for a phone and they see a rotary phone and they don't know what to do. So it's as good as having the phone lines cut. There's a lot of old school college level 1990s technology to be had in this, and I think it's fantastic.
I'm very happy that you brought up Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. That movie is fucking hilarious. But you're right, there is a lot of technology, and there was something about Urban Legend while I was watching it where we have been spending a lot of time in the 1990s, the late 1990s to be very specific, and yet of all 3 films that we have covered in this wonderful decade, this one seems the most locked into the decade just because of a few things such as the phone lines, pagers, looking up shit in actual books. Like, that's heaven forfend. Go to the library and take out a book, which is exactly what I did with this amazing book, the 1990s teen horror cycle by Alexandra West. And not only have I been plugging this book heavily while we're talking about the 90s teen horror cycle, because we have talked about 3 of the most important, I think, films from this cycle, leaving out conveniently Scream, because neither of us are fans of Scream, but we are fans of, like, say, Rue Morgue Magazine, Andrea Subissati, Alexandra West, who pens this and the French Extremity book as well. I think she's working on another book, from what I understand, because I was listening to the Faculty of Horror podcast, which is where I first heard of this wonderful writer. And they are doing I Know What You Did Last Summer right now. Probably, like, we had done it completely unplanned, and they probably did too, that there is the remake film coming out. So if you're interested in hearing even more about I Know What You Did Last Summer, and you've read Alexandra West's book, and you want more, you can go to the Faculty of Horror show and check out them talking about the film as well. I don't know if they're doing Urban Legend, because so many people seem to not forget about this film. Like, it's included in Alexandra's book. People talk about it side by side with the other things, but I don't think enough people really study it or watch it or revisit it or liked it as much as the other films. And it's crazy to me because this is my most favorite. This is the one that when people talk about the 90s teen horror cycle, this is the film that I wish the conversation was about, because it seems to boil down all of it to its basic alchemical perfection. And to be clear, this is indeed a Lydia pick. And interestingly enough, this was one of the films that when we were discussing going into the 1990s and talking about the tail end of the decade, talking about these films that were birthed from Scream, this was always going to be one of the films that we were talking about. The Faculty obviously was floated heavily by you, and as well as Urban Legend. And I was the one that wanted to do I Know What You Did Last Summer. So I think that it is really interesting that this strikes a chord with you specifically, but I am curious, did you watch it when it came out at the time, or was it something that you caught? You rented it, or a couple of years later, or how did it work for you?
I rented it as soon as it was available for rent because I didn't really go to the theater very often at all throughout my whole life. So it wasn't something that pulled me like a moth to the flame, so to speak, with these particular films too. I had already gotten some fatigue of the floating head film posters, the perfect shiny happy teens in these films. They didn't connect with me. I was not a fan of Scream, still am not. I Know What You Did Last Summer I didn't like when I first watched it. It's sort of regained a little bit of sheen for me upon watching it as an adult. It's a lot better than I remember. I think I was just a really harsh judge, but this, when I watched it, I was like, see, this is what those other movies should have been like. It's actually scary. It's actually tense. It's got believable characters, like really believable characters to me, no matter how perfectly hot and shiny happy they look now to me. But at the time, they seemed approachable. And I didn't watch these television shows that some of them were in. So it wasn't like something I didn't recognize them from that. So they were all new faces to me. I thought that they did a really good job of actually acting. And I thought that the dialogue was good. And at the time, was also interested in a little bit of student reportage. So having a a beat reporter for the school that was very serious about his journalism career was very refreshing.
There is an interesting phenomena that this film has that I consider it university as city. This is so isolated. They never venture outside of the campus except for a couple of lonesome, isolated roads aspects of the story. But by and large, this is completely self contained to the campus. And somehow it doesn't seem absurd that there is no outside influence beyond you have professors, the dean, you have campus security, and then you have the student body. And at no point do we have police, detectives, anybody entering these premises to take over from this. It would be strictly a Pendleton matter, not to be interfered with to the outside world.
Like even in pieces, they leave the campus and get the cops involved, like so involved that they have an undercover tennis coach. But I digress. You're right, and I love that about this. And I do love it was filmed at the U of T campus, so it was like, yay Canada, go Toronto, which is neat to me, and I'm probably super neat to people who have attended that university. So I think that's it makes for a more rich visual experience staying on campus because you've got the wonderful Gothic buildings and you've got the quad and you've got kind of like suburban looking areas, parkland areas, all sorts of different areas you can film against as your backdrop. It's not like the quite boring, more, they look like jails as far as institutions go. I'm looking at you, Carleton University. It's not like a pretty place to be. I mean, you could film downtown here at U of O and get the same experience with the wonderful squares and the city backdrop and some things and point your camera a different area and it's a park and point your camera a different direction. It's a Gothic facade with ivy. You get that from this campus. So it's at least visually varied, not like a high school film that takes place only in the high school. It gets visually boring quite quickly. So I like that about it. And it reminded me a lot of like Richard Lehman novels because a lot of them do take place on college campuses and a lot of them are very isolated like that. And I really appreciated it watching it again and realizing how much like it's like how much it's like my favorite horror slasher novels.
That's interesting. And you've been spending a lot of time with Richard Lehman, as anyone who follows you on YouTube would know. And that's all wrapped up by now, by the way, right? All your Richard Lehman reading. I think I remember that episode. You finished it?
It is, yeah. A month-long Richard Lehman reading-a-thon, reading in rumps, because he mentions rumps at least once or 27 times per novel. Yeah, rump. He landed on his rump, patted her rump, looked at her rump, and smacked her rump. She got stabbed in the rump, rumpapalooza. And, I like to rump around a little bit in Richard Lehman world. And I have probably 30 damn novels on my shelf by him. So it's fun to go back and revisit ones I haven't read in a while, read the heavy hitters like The Cellar, and now finding ones like that have been retitled, because I've been looking for one called Tread Softly, which has a different name, and I do actually have it on my shelf. Go figure. So Layman Palooza never really ends for me.
I was just trying to imagine his prose if he was describing a woman being stabbed in the rump in a rumpus room.
He would probably squeeze an extra rump in there where you'd least expect it. It's that and bouncing erections.
I'm starting to like this guy already.
The killers usually run around naked for whatever reason, and their erections bob.
That's
around.
Yeah, I can imagine, because that's what happens. It like things aren't always as rigid and stiff as you might imagine. That is absolutely unhinged. I had no idea. I had known that he had a flair for the adolescent, let's say, in some of the ways that his prose would come across to the average reader, but I had no idea that we were dealing with rump. Seems almost quaintly stuffy compared to a bouncing erection.
And Willamette University is where he studied, so I just wonder what kind of weird parties went on in there in the 70s when he was a student, or maybe even a professor. I'm not really sure.
I don't know, but I could imagine that, or I would hope that the parties wouldn't include drying your dog in a microwave.
That's one thing about urban legend, is that I don't see a lot of interaction with the teachers. You see the dean and that one counselor or whatever she is. I don't remember exactly what role she plays, but they don't really interact very much with their teachers, and they don't seem to go to class very often.
This is a phenomenon that was very popular in television shows that were oriented around youth. Things such as Dawson's Creek, Beverly Hills 90210, Party of Five, places that would start in high school and then kind of realize quickly that these types of shows operated well to start and end perhaps in schools, to bookend stories, but ultimately we were dealing with children characters who were written and acted as if they were just adults, and it was just an opportunity to have things contained in their own little world, absent of authority figures, and forced to have rely on their own survival skills in which to navigate the various trials and tribulations of life. Usually adults and authority figures, and urban legend is no exception, would only interject into the story to be a thorn in one's side, except for perhaps a knowing and winking fellow adult that perhaps acts a little kid-like themselves, who's going to chip in at the last moment. Perhaps one that watches Coffee and knows all the lines and pretends that they're a badass police officer from one of the old Pam Grier movies. But so this is very much in keeping, and urban legend really is a prime example of a film that very much reflects the time, both on television and the changes in horror in the late 1990s.
It's interesting that I was lamenting the fact that they don't leave campus or to get the police involved as well, but then conveniently forgot about the rent-a-cop, Reese, by Laird of Devine in this film, which conveniently is a cop, but a campus cop, and they never have to leave campus to have that interaction with the law enforcement. Yeah, really conveniently written that way. And I think it's that tight writing that I just absolutely love within this. It's not as loose, or it's not written for the trailer as we have picked on with previous films. It seems to be really much better thought out than the other entries in this, and I don't know why it's not usually remembered. Uh, then again, I also confused it with Copycat from time to time, so I'm just as bad as everybody else. Was this one that you had watched when it first came out and gone to the theater to see?
Yes, this was a film that I had gone to see. I would have been about 14 years old when this film was released. How do you get into an R-rated picture when you are 14 years old? I will remind everybody that I'm 6'4", and that is something that I've always been very tall and had a deep voice. So I was able to pass quite easily. It was not hard. They don't check your ID. You're usually dealing with a teenager that does not give a fuck and they make minimum wage. Sylvia Horda, by the way, this was his first writing credit. He had never written a script before. And this was him coming out the gate. They even had somebody else, a more experienced writer, come in to do a pass to polish things up. And apparently his line was, "No polishing needing. This is great." And so sometimes that tight writing comes from the fact that people were just kind of born to do it. Jamie Blank's first time director, he had never directed a feature before. There's so many people on this project that came out the gates running. But for me, like I had said many times before, this was yet another bit of steady pop culture diet that I was on amongst my friends. Seeing this in theaters, I saw the sequel in theaters as well. And much as quickly as these types of films crossed my threshold, they weren't necessarily films that I spent a lot of time with. And so they would leave. And it wasn't until a few years later that you start hearing people, oh, urban legend, and particularly now that we do this, and there are resources like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram in which people do haul videos. They find this film on VHS, they find it on DVD, they get the Scream Factory Blu-ray, which I have, and people talk about how great this film is. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of my reaction to that is urban legend. that old thing, that slasher that's not from the 80s. Who wants that? It's not that I thought that the film was bad. It was just that I didn't remember it all that well. I remembered some of the kills. I remembered the cast, although I did forget that Jared Leto was in this until I turned it on and I was watching the opening credits, and I was like, Jared Leto, who the fuck is he in this? and then of course you see Jared Leto, and he looks pretty much the same as he always did, except he doesn't have quite his Christ-like hair that he sports these days. Yeah. But this was really fun for me to go back and revisit and look at it through the lens of, now we're doing an episode about this for the show. And dear listeners, I'm sure Lydia can attest to this, there's a different way in which you watch films when this is for a show. It really requires you, in my opinion, and I know Lydia does, I know Lydia takes notes. I'm a bad note taker, I don't take notes. But what I do is I start thinking about the context of this film. And I start wondering about, what would the audience have been like? And this time I have a great answer for that, because I was part of the audience that went to go see this when it initially came out. And it did feel to me at the time the most like Scream than any of the other slashers that were coming out at the time. Really, truly, and honestly. Except they didn't have a heavy reliance on mentioning other horror films. They did start mentioning these urban legends, which, I don't know about you, at the time, I didn't know any of these urban legends. I didn't know what they were talking about. I had never heard any of these before.
Wow.
And so, with the exception of and maybe you can, they keep talking about the calls coming from inside the house. They're talking about, I was gonna say my earliest recollection of that plot point is from Black Christmas. Of course, the more famous version of that is When a Stranger Calls. But are they talking about something else that predates these films? Because Professor Wexler talks about this urban legend emerged from the 1960s, and I couldn't say for 100% if it's just, you're referencing movies though, or was this an urban legend before that?
It was an urban legend before that, and all of them seem to be. I don't know. I think that if there's an urban legend that was spawned directly from this film, it would be the fact that this friend in college is a murderer that's running around murdering all your friends. But yeah, it was an older thing, and it was a cautionary tale for babysitters, and it's the same sort of thing that spawned the Halloween film, where you're left alone outside of your own home. You don't really know this stranger's home very well, and you're in charge of these little children who are usually sleeping. So you're basically alone in a strange place, and anything could happen, right? And escaped lunatics kind of thing is usually what happens. But yeah, it's got an older fount, like all of them do. And the one of um, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light is recounted in a slightly different way as early as the mid 1800s. So like these stories were campfire stories, then they turn into basically urban legends as we know them today. You can research quite a few of them on Snopes.com, and Snopes does go into the history of a lot of them, or tries to find the first mention. So I didn't specifically look up the calls coming from inside the house, but like I'd heard those sorts of stories, and you heard them in the news as well, right? Like I don't know if it's like myths and legends that made their way into the news, much like the myth and legend today. Did you know we actually know somebody who knows somebody who knows someone who had a student bring a litter box into their classroom because they think they're a cat?
Yeah, you're right, and it's funny that you frame that ridiculousness to an urban legend, which I had never thought of it. Of course, that's what it would be. And I did want to come correct and say that I did know the kidney one. I
Oh,
had
yeah.
heard that one before.
Yeah, that one's so
But
popular. It's been made into many different movies.
weirdly enough, I remember seeing Urban Legend 2, and I was more familiar with the urban legends that they use in that film than I was with this film.
I hadn't read the High Beams one, and not the gang involved version of High Beams, where if, like they explain in this film, if you're driving along and someone flashes their high beams, or has their, if somebody has their lights off and you flash them to let them know their high beams or their car's lights need to be on, they will turn around and kill you because they're a gang member. This is a gang initiation tactic. Foolish. But I heard the other one, which is how this film kicks off, in a way where there's a killer in the back seat of a car, and the car behind you is flashing their high beams, because every time they flash their high beams, the killer goes down. So if you're driving along and you see someone flash their high beams, in my mind, it's not that my taillight might be out. It's that there's a killer in my back seat and they're trying to save my life. Because that's how I'd originally heard this. And then you hear, and as a kid I heard, oh no, that's not it. People will flash their high beams and then they give some other wacky reason that they had read or heard or been witness to, with air quotes, because I mean, just like these foolish stories that you hear in the news. And I picked that litter box one specifically because we did literally hear someone try and tell one of us that they know someone who that's literally happened to, and we know that it's as true as people eating dogs in LA.
Well, fuck all that, Lydia. Fuck it all to hell. Because the world is depressing, and I need to know, what is this movie even about anyways?
It is believe what you read. Not don't believe everything you read, which used to be the saying. Nowadays, it should be believe what you read. Find fact checking, find Snopes.com, find the reporters in your life because other people are going to feed you full of bullshit. All of these stories, if they had gone and found that book in the library that lays out all the urban legends, they would have had something to go on a lot earlier and had that cautionary tale really actually work for them. Maybe not in the case of the first girl, because I never heard the urban legend about the stuttering man.
I haven't either. However, oh my God, do I love this opening sequence. And it is a wonderful treat on a couple of levels. And of course, the first being the atmosphere. It's great, but it has Brad Dourif in a bit part.
Brad Dourif in a bit part, and a total eclipse of the heart in an ironic / unironic way. I don't know. It is the kind of song like American Girl in Silence of the Lambs, when the girl is driving along singing to American Girl off key, like a broken-headed person, and you just want to stab them in the temple and be done with it and have this be over pretty soon. So you're going to have your wish, and you know it because it's a horror film, right? So I really like that, and that the lyrics keep saying turn around. It's delicious. And it is very much, it's campy, but without being tongue-in-cheek foolish.
Not even the first time that it would be the first time to my knowledge, but also years later, the Strangers 2 Pray at Night would also use the exact same song in an iconic sequence with an axe. This scene is starring Natasha Gregson Wagner, who, by the way, is the daughter of Natalie Wood, who is no stranger to some very wonderful horror films themselves. And if I could heap praise on the opening sequence of this film for the entire duration of this episode, it would still not be enough to explain how much I like it. And I think what you have here is such a perfect example, and this is not hyperbolic. I think that this opening sequence should be taught in fucking schools, because this is a beginning, middle, and end that contributes mightily to the entire plot line. This plot line with the character of Michelle is critical to the overall story, and also it could be self-contained. It could be a short. It could just be its own thing, but yet they back it off. It's not just a cheap kill to establish a sense of mood of the type of film that you're going to be watching. Kick him in the balls, here's your kill. It's not even really gory. It's all in the impression of it. But then just Brad Dourif's performance in this is so fucking good. And him yelling, finally finding his words, because he's playing a character who does have a stutter, and he is a little hunched, and he looks a little disheveled, and he's in the rain, and he has long hair, and he looks to be creepy, right? There's no other word for it. He just looks creepy and perhaps dangerous.
He's playing up his own facial features as well, because he's got that one wild staring vulture eye when he wants it, and he uses it to his advantage here.
And of course, horror fans are thinking, it's Brad Dourif, of course. It's Chucky himself. He's obviously going to be a bad guy. And he has this cockamamie, obviously fake story about a credit card. And then he locks the door behind them. And then Michelle has to fight her way free. And he is struggling to find his words. And he is saying stop. Now, anyone watching the scene, you'll get a sneaking suspicion that perhaps he is not the problem that she thinks he is, but it's never done in a way in which it's obvious that he's not a problem. It's done just subtly enough, in my opinion, that but it's not stretching the line of credulity, in terms of the scene itself. And then the way he delivers when she speeds off, there's someone in the back seat. Sometimes, man, like, you just need a veteran character actor to deliver a line that has so much sincerity in it. And it's just, I was just such an amazing actor. And for some reason, the way he delivered that line was so earnest to me that I was like, oh, like, it's so good.
It is, and that's just the first few minutes. We've already been treated to this wretched singing, so we're already off kilter. It works so well, and I really like the lighting, the setting, everything. It's believable. We believe that she's isolated. We believe that he's concerned. We believe that she's safe for one moment in the gas station that looks a little bit rickety. And we've seen enough horror film, without saying it. That's the thing, the biggest difference between this and Scream. They don't have to say it or spoon feed you or hit you over the head with a horror studies or, the A to Z of horror film book. They just let it lay there. They play their cards and stand back and watch you go, oh man, this is just like a scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre or whatever.
Texas Chainsaw is exactly what I was going to bring up. The whole thing is evocative of The Cook. And coming and, Sally thinking that she's safe. And you're right. And again, they're not sitting there just listing horror movie titles. And I'm not going to go too hard on Scream today because we've had 3 episodes and it has kind of made me think of something a little bit about Scream, which I'll talk about at the end of the episode. But this opening sequence is our inciting incident, and we know that Michelle is a student at this campus, and we are going to be treated to our new cast of characters who are at Pendleton University, and they are regaling each other with urban legends, but not before we're introduced to Tara Reid and her, what is this show? Is it like Dr. Ruth? People just call in and say, I had a weird blowjob.
It's a college radio show. So like when you were at college radio, did they have like call-in shows that were like racy like this and tell-all shows?
No, they did not. Now, we did have call-in shows. We had request shows. We had things of that nature, but here's the dirty little secret about why you probably don't really want to do this if you have a weekly college radio show. And I don't want to burst anyone's illusions, but people didn't really call in. And it's because your listenership is so low. And I'm sure somebody right now was saying, I was in college radio and we had callers off the hook. I don't believe you. And I'm telling you right now that even when we had competitions or where you could win concert tickets, we did a tropical vacation. We had plane tickets with your fucking name on them. We still could not get people to call in. Only like maybe 1, maybe 2, if that. And that's when we were dangling something in front of their face. So this idea that, and by the way, like, when were you in college? Like 2005. So that was a long time ago. And I can only imagine it would be even worse if they didn't cancel my poor beloved radio program at Algonquin College. But, I think that now it seems as though it's a little unbelievable, but there were frames of reference for this. It's like a Dr. Ruth type thing. It's like people calling in to have basic sex ed questions, although the premise of the show seems to just be bragging that you are having sex. I mean, her producer's barely wearing a shirt. He's so ripped and his shirt's completely open.
He is. And they don't really talk much about her producer. I don't even know who plays him. Like, yeah, great guy, great little actor for his very bit part as Tara Reid's sidekick, sort of, when she's in the studio, which she seems to take with all seriousness. She'll leave frat parties and be like, sorry, I'm on air in 10. gotta go, which is mental to me. No one behaves like that. It's part of your curriculum, like first off, but like I don't know. We were invited to do a horror show, a midnight horror show at Carleton. And it never got off the ground, unfortunately, because I didn't have much listenership. And it would have involved me literally going in to the college or the university at 11:30 at night and leaving at like 1:30 or so. Like that would have been a lot. But it was like, who would be listening? Like the 10 people would be listening. Just make it a podcast and I can record this in the morning or something. That would have made a lot more sense. But it would have been really tough to get people if we did any sort of call-in segment. No way would people call in to have other people for interviewees to be available at midnight for a show if they're in North America in our time zone. I mean, it's just asking far too much, let alone a call-in. Like cross-country check-in on CBC radio gets a lot of call-ins. I mean, the other shows, like the call-in shows on actual radio stations, because they have a massive listenership, it's very rare for college radio to have at that base. So I can totally believe that no one or one or two trickle-in calls would happen. So then they're all staged. I mean, that sucks. You're going to say, oh, well, I live near whatever university in the US, or college as they usually call them, and that radio station is bigger than the local radio station, or it's bigger than this, and Howard Stern type bull stuff. But that's so rare. It is so rare. And to have, like, more accurately, like Sex with Sue, where people would call into Sex with Sue here in Canada and have these like racy questions. I don't know. We had tried at the newspaper at Algonquin to have an advice column, and it just fizzles out so bad because nobody wrote in. Nobody.
But this isn't a problem for Tara Reid's character, Sasha. And the way that we frame this is, oh, where are we at in terms of who's going to be our protagonist? They did us a little fakey fake with Michelle, although I never thought that she was going to be our protagonist. And now it's friends. Now everyone is just at a coffee shop. And the hoariest cliche of the 1990s is just a bunch of smarmy young people lounging on very elaborate Gothic furniture in a coffee house that you would presume is on campus. Well, everything's on campus in this film, so it absolutely would have to be. And, you know, they have their urban legends that, you know, Parker is going to be describing this brutal massacre that occurred where else? Right there on campus.
I think that the Stanley Hall story is very interesting, and that's not something that I've ever heard. That sounds almost like V for Vendetta levels of insanity going on in that story. And I like that it kicks off the idea of urban legends. Whether we had ever heard the In the Backseat urban legend, which I had by the time I was watching this, so I was already just on tenterhooks happy with this film from the get-go, because I'm like, ooh, they're not just calling it urban legend for as a joke. It really is drawing on urban legends that I've heard myself. Wow, this is cool. And then we get this made up Stanley Hall one, which no one would have ever heard of. But they do that thing that they do, like we talked about in the previous film, where they're just sitting around a campfire. No, you're telling it wrong. This is what really happened. Or, hey, no, I heard it this way. And I absolutely love this scene for all its pretentiousness of sitting around what looks to be a common area in an Ivy League university, or the Peach Pit from Friends. It's like this made up third place where students apparently went to in the 90s.
There was a lot of pressure to like coffee in the 1990s if you didn't. As I say, drinking my coffee, maybe I never was meant to drink coffee lids. Maybe because I was told that cool, smart kids drank coffee who could see between the lines of society. But what we do know is that the Stanley Hall dormitory is abandoned at this point. It was dilapidated. Back in the 1970s, there was a humongous, like you described it, a V for Vendetta style massacre in which everyone was killed. And now it lays as a kind of scary place in which you do Bloody Mary. This is weird. Why do you
Yeah.
do when they start doing Bloody Mary at the door? And I'm thinking to myself, all right, I don't know everything about urban legends, particularly at the time in which I saw this initially. But I know that there's at least one thing wrong with your Bloody Mary thing. What does Bloody Mary have to do? First of all, the concept of Bloody Mary, the Bloody Mary herself. What the fuck does that have to do with the Stanley Hall massacre? Nothing. Second of all, you're supposed to do this into a mirror. And that's the weird thing about a lot of these urban legends that I notice now. I had heard of most of these, if not all of these now, but they're just tweaked slightly to a way that I don't know them. And maybe that's the compulsion to be like, no, how it actually happened was this.
Partially, yeah. There are different versions of some of them, older versions, newer versions. I mean, is there a Bloody Mary now that has to do with if you're alone in a Zoom room? If you're on Zoom and everyone else glitches out and you're alone, do you start doing Bloody Mary and then she connects or something? Like, is that the new version? But yeah, they're missing the prime thing you need in Bloody Mary, which is, of course, the mirror.
Yeah, there seems to be. I mean, it's almost like creepy pastas, right? Like those are kind of like urban
Yeah.
legends, like the episode of SpongeBob with the hyper realistic eyes, or something that a young person might. Wow, that's one of the ones that I know.
Yeah, like that Pirate Cove thing that was made into a miniseries on Shudder. It was really effective, and they took a lot of popular creepypastas and made them into this miniseries. I thought it was really good because it is sort of that urban legend. There's a new book coming out about Sleepy Hollow, how it is America's urban legend. And it is so unbelievable because of like the flaming pumpkin and the Hessian soldier. We don't even most people don't even know what a Hessian soldier is now. So it's gone completely into myth, but it's unique in that we all know, everyone alive on earth right now that reads books and likes horror knows that that wasn't an urban legend, that was a fictional story because it's so contemporary. We know that. So what we don't know is some of these urban legends like Bloody Mary. Well, we sort of know the origins of Bloody Mary, but not who really sat down the first time and wrote down that this is what you do for Bloody Mary. It started out probably as a fictional story, a weird tale in a magazine or something like that, but people told it for some reason and warped it to make it sound like it actually happened. Or the real ghost stories of the 1700s, 1800s, like uh, I was asleep at night and heard a noise and was fumbling for the matches, and someone handed me a lit match, but there was no one else in the room. That sort of ghost story turns into an urban legend. But I don't know, how would they have not known they need a mirror? I mean, it leads into our red herring, which we have some red herrings in this film, and like because these teen horror cycle films wouldn't be complete without red herrings. Scooby Doo like red herrings. Maybe if we were to believe that something like a professor that was standoffish and was maybe the sole survivor of Stanley Hall, let's say, crept around there and waited until people came and did the broken Bloody Mary thing, that would like incite him to go after them.
And it could very well be. We are going to get interrupted by our attempts to summon the Bloody Mary to Stanley Hall by Damon Brooks, who is a trickster, a jokester, or whatnot. And this is going to lead us into the big thesis statement of urban legend brought to us appropriately by Professor Wexler, who is played by the incomparable Robert Englund, which is always nice to see. And this film does something interesting in which a lot of the red herrings are veteran character actors and all from horror, and it would make you think that it would draw your attention disproportionately to those characters. Now, of course, aficionados would say it's too obvious to do that, but it is very interesting. We have Robert Englund. It's nice to see him out of makeup. He's still got a lot of blonde in his hair. Like he's still a fairly young man at the point of this film. And he is going to tell all of us. And now it might be no wonder that our characters don't know anything about Bloody Mary. It's because they seem to be flummoxed by the concept of urban legends entirely. Because when Wexler says, what you are experiencing is an urban legend, and he says it in a conspiratorial way as if he is going to levy this phrase to a room full of 300 students in an auditorium style classroom, and they're all kind of going to like look at each other like, urban what is this? And so I don't know. I don't know if this film is the reason that this is such common knowledge. To the idea that you would have all of these slick coffee drinking genius kids that they've never heard the term urban legend, it's so silly, but it doesn't ruin anything. What I like about all of Professor Wexler's examples that he uses is it's like he's got like wood carvings of all of these things. It's like, the stranger from inside the house. Yes. And it looks like he's showing like wood carved drawings of like a demon from like the 1600s.
No, it's definitely a lecture, and it's a culture lecture at that, West. So of course he's got wood cuttings and scrolls and vellum parchments or whatever. Yes, he definitely has done his research, and you, mere student, have not. So I see why I also confuse this with the film Copycat, because it starts out with a lecture, and I think I spliced that lecture into this film for some reason.
That's wild. That is.
I know. It makes no sense. I need to watch Copycat again really bad because I need to set the two films straight, because I know that this film has nothing to do with serial killers necessarily.
No, not necessarily. But I could tell you what it does have something to do with urban legends. And he's going to go through a lot of them, the soda, the pop rocks thing. I mean, Damon's going to have an opportunity to be a tricky little bastard yet again.
It sets up a little bit of the idea that none of these students here would recognize these as urban legends. This would be the first time that they would have heard of any of this stuff. So somebody having a killer in the back seat, they wouldn't be like, "Oh my god, it's like that urban legend come true," because we've established that they don't know any of them. Bloody Mary, no wonder they were doing it wrong. They don't fucking know Bloody Mary. Like, they don't get it. They don't someone said, "Go say Bloody Mary" in front of Stanley Hall, and they're like, okay." They weren't like, "Wait, we need a mirror. It needs to be midnight," all this stuff, you know? But I never really heard this Pop Rocks thing.
I have heard of it, but I didn't really ever consider it an urban legend because it just seems so ridiculous. It's like this idea that like Mountain Dew makes you sterile. That was something that I remember
Yeah.
as a kid as well. Um,
I thought it was Mentos and Dr. Pepper,
yeah,
though.
that could also, yeah, I've heard that as well. So I don't know, maybe this is just something that's a lot more prevalent than we realize. But
Mhm.
we have our character of Natalie. Natalie is our protagonist. It's not Sasha talking about blowjobs. It is Natalie, who seems like a fairly down to earth student. This is a large cast, I should point out as well. Not only do you have a really high body count in this film, just in general, there's a lot of these people who are in the same class. And it becomes pretty obvious when they're just constantly cutting to so many different characters in this humongous scene. The only thing that I could think of, I was like, fuck, this scene's expensive. And it's all those extras, right? That you have to pad everything out. Now, after this class is done and all the jokes are done and we've established urban legends, there's also something else because our intrepid reporter Paul has his big scoop, or at least his statement in the school newspaper. Lunatic on campus.
That's a great headline, and it's written in wartime font, over 72 points. Anything over 72 points is reserved for wartime. Well, it used to be anyway. So at this point, it's like whoa. I like that he's caused a stir with the student newspaper. They're ripping them off the stands because they don't want this sort of story getting out, and they're calling it yellow journalism basically. And he's like, "People have a right to know, man." It's great. It's brilliant. But yeah, lunatic on campus, where we have to do a little. They do this fairly well, where we're like, wait a second, that story at the beginning, they never said specifically, like I didn't link the two specifically. So, like, now we need a story of how she's intrinsically linked to these people, and we get it in Natalie, our little Molly Ringwald. She knew this person. She keeps it kind of secret at first, though. So I kind of like that as well. Instead of playing the drama queen ticket with like, "Oh, alas, my closest friend, my bosom buddy, we hadn't spake in a year."
Paul is the type of reporter that I think people who go into journalism want to be like. And I think that it
Mhm.
is this fantasy of you're the investigative journalist. You are boots on the ground. You're practically a PI, and you are shoving recorders into people of authority's faces, and the people want the truth. And they're doing this to the crusty, bitter old Dean Adams, who, is always wearing a gray suit, and he's got a stiff upper lip, and he doesn't like Paul at all, and he, threatens him with, being like basically a crappy journalist later, and is pretty reductive, and like no one can know about this. He's the mayor in Jaws. He's the quintessential character trope of the guy in charge that doesn't want any of this to get out because people will worry. And yes, we learn that Natalie does know Michelle, and we learn this because she is about to go to her room. She's going to encounter Tosh, who is just I I'm one of these days, Lids, I am going to stop asking you what you think of goth characters in movies. But it's not
Ah.
today. What do you think of old Tosh, played by the lovely Danielle Harris?
I love Tosh, played by the lovely Danielle Harris, and I suppose in a certain way, reluctantly, she becomes another one of these red herrings played by horror actors and actresses of yore. So yeah, she's a interesting, hate-filled anger muffin of a girl, and I love her. I like her look. I like the music that she listens to is at least goth adjacent. So they don't hit it on target entirely. And that she's a super tramp trying to just devour men. She's devouring every goth dude on campus, man. She's banging them continuously. I personally never knew any goth people that were quite that horny. Um, like poison type horny, like crazy. Like usually that was reserved for the jock girls that behave like that. But so they get some things right and some things wrong, but I generally like her character. And it's, told through that lens of like 1990s teens where goths were still reviled, feared, and sometimes chased down and beaten.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming still out of like Satanic Panic was not that long ago, and the goth scene had switched to I mean yeah, because I would say she's not listening to like industrial, but like it kind of, I can't remember if it's Manson or if it's Rob Zombie. I think it's Rob Zombie.
Rob
Mm.
Zombie and some Stabbing Westward and some other vague electronica that I can't put my finger on, because there's a lot of songs in this that were popular that I don't recognize. You had mentioned Zoot Suit Riot. We'll talk about Cherry Poppin' Daddies in a little bit, but I didn't. I've listened to the song again and I don't recognize it whatsoever.
The craziest thing about Tasha's character, and this speaks, and the reason why I want to talk about this is because this was a fear that I had, a weird fear that I had growing up before I was in college and didn't understand how anything worked, and only would ever observe colleges from American movies. I thought this notion that you would have a roommate in a tiny ass fucking room that you needed to navigate with, that you would have to live with a virtual stranger in your space, not sharing a common room, that this person was fucking 4 feet away from you. And in this case, just fucking like a beast. I can't imagine. Obviously, I'm not much of an exhibitionist, but I can't imagine just like wanting to have sex while my roommate is trying to sleep with headphones on. I'm like, this is a lot. Like, I don't like put a sock in the door or something, Tosh, but find a different avenue for your exploits, maybe. But people are rather rude to her. I feel as though the reason why I like the Tosh character is not just because I like Danielle Harris, but it's also just because people are kind of shitty to her. And it is just because she's a goth person. And even when her fate is sealed in the film, they're even more rude about it. So that is Natalie's interaction with her roommate. And then we are going to realize once she gets her friend off the internet that she does know Michelle. She's going to listen to messages from her mother, and she is going to open up a photo album or a yearbook, and they're going to see that they were on the swim team together.
They were cheerleaders.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me.
Even more fun horror tropey. They were cheerleaders. Really cute sort of reveal too, because with the concern call from the mom, I could have pictured myself getting that sort of call had I been hiding the fact that I was friends at one time with a girl that had just been murdered. It was very realistic too. And for her to just sort of like pull out the yearbook and take a look and just be like, oh, dang. Geez, how sad. And then put it away and not really want to talk about it. Because what sort of talk about? They had a falling out. We'll hear about later how serious the falling out was and how this is related deliciously to the entire plot. But for the time being, it's just like, I don't know, you think maybe one girl bullied the other. Maybe one girl banged a boyfriend or something. I don't know. Maybe they used to bang people in front of one another. That's why she's so comfortable with Tosh being her raging cockhound right next door to her, and can sleep through it. But I had the same reaction to a song. I believe it's B.A. Johnson who sings the song, "Sleeping with my Walkman." Sleeping with my Walkman while my roommate's fucking. Great song. Well, not really. It's a song, but I always like what the hell? Like, is this from another room and they're really loud? But I guess it's happening like it does in this film, right in your face, which it would just leave. Like, sure, you have to sleep. Like, I would ask the university to move me to another room for our irreconcilable differences. Really, although I do really like the layout of Tasha's side of the room. It looks so much more appealing to me. Much like Wednesday Addams, half of the room in Wednesday.
I was thinking about that the entire time. I was like, holy shit, they really just like an episode of Laverne and Shirley, just right down the middle. This is my side, this is your side. And it looks like art directed within an inch of its life. Like even her bed sheets, they almost look vinyl. It's pretty crazy. She is this isn't Riot Girl, this isn't alt adjacent. She is goth. She's so goth, she's on Goth for Goth to hook up. That's her website that she goes to, that she spends literally all of her time on.
It's so much more like you had mentioned when we were talking before recording that it would remind you quite a bit of the bulletin board at Vampire
Yes.
Freaks, which is weird because I heard somebody just yesterday be like, "Oh, is there anything like Vampire Freaks? I really miss it." But it's so much more the way Tosh is using it is so much more like Grinder for goths. But there was gothicmatch.com, which is a lot more cute. It's like Plenty of Fish if you use those sorts of dating apps, but it was goth. It was goth for goth.
This is a business opportunity. People who miss Vampire Freaks, You have an opportunity to bring goth for goth with that just bloody font. It's so funny. I don't mean to be talking so much about this website, but it was so distracting. And Tosh is super into it. And maybe I am too. I don't know. But I could tell you what Damon is interested in. He's interested in Natalie. You see, he is going to console her. Don't let this get out to the rest of the campus, Lydia. But he's actually kind of a good listener.
Oh my God. Here's another urban legend they don't mention, that boys are only after one thing. Because boy, is this guy after one thing. And he changes on a dime from this kind of lovable trickster to this very dark, like, have you trapped in my car kind of thing. And you are going to make out with me no matter what kind of guy. It's very, very effective and creepy and believable,
He called
unfortunately.
her a bitch, like
Yeah.
immediately. Um,
And she punches him square
mhm.
in the mouth. Like, no, I'm not gonna make out with you. And he's just like, oh, come here, you little lady.
Yeah, old
Yeah.
Joshua Jackson Pacey from Dawson's Creek. They pull a little sting gag with the radio with him with the Dawson's Creek theme song, but he is going to be not long for this world. I want to talk about how much I like the look of this fucking slasher. I love the parka with the hood up. You can't really see their face. Again, much like a lot of slashers from this era, they fuck it up in the third act. But in this case, you have a strong silhouette. There's so much blue in this film with lightning and the rain and the lighting in general, the blue parka. There's something that almost makes it seem like this film should be in the winter, but it's not. It
Mhm.
it it, it you know takes place in like tempered weather, and so. But this incident in which we have. I was just going to call him Pacey, but Joshua Jackson, Damon's character, Damon, he leaves to go take a leak and, of course, is attacked for his trouble. And then this killer manages to set up a rig in which if Natalie gets into the car or like tries to drive away in the vehicle, she pulls a rope. That rope is attached to Damon's throat. And it's about a yo yo effect. Now, I will say, Natalie is the person that kills Damon, and she's aware of that fact.
Basically, yes.
That is pretty buck wild, although you could say that she was panicked. Although I feel as though what we're going to learn is she's fucking bloodthirsty. But, but
Both her and her dead friend were shitty drivers. I will just put that out there. They were both should neither of them should ever be behind the wheel of a car. They're both terrible fucking drivers. But uh yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if that rope wouldn't just snap. If we were doing horror experiments and hanging one another from ropes and trees and looping it around trailer hitches,
I would almost.
I
Oh,
mm,
sorry. I was just going to say, I don't even think the branch would hold, to be honest with you. It's
yeah.
just so much
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah, it's a whole car and everything, and, like, I don't know. I don't think that the tree would stop the car necessarily, but, what do I know? We haven't, conducted this horror experiment, but, of course, she runs away from the scene, gets police and such involved, and no one is to be found.
And of course, this is the boy who cried wolf, Lydia. Damon is a trickster. He and his puckish charm has gotten him has gotten him in hot water because people aren't even going to look for his buddy because guess what? They're leading into the weekend or as Dean Adams says, the weekend. But they're not going to be looking for him. And this all by the way is self-isolated because Natalie is going to go to campus security. And we are going to have this very self-contained thing in which people aren't going to the police per se. And then
Yeah.
later on, when there is an opportunity, or it would be absolutely unfathomable not to go to the police, there'll be a convenient couple of lines of dialogue about why they're not even going to look into it. And they're not going to find anything. They're not going to find any evidence. And so right now we have Natalie, who's very distraught, whose friend has been killed. She believes somebody has been killed in front of her, but is also fairly easily convinced that he probably was just tricking her.
And it also gives us another red herring if we really want it, even though this one would be a hard red herring to swallow because we saw him struggling on the roof of the car. We saw him fall lifeless enough, and we saw the parka person in another place. So he would have to be working with the person, not just alone, right? There'd have to be two killers in this scenario if he were a red herring. But he's sort of maybe a red herring to the rest of them in the backs of their minds because he never mentioned he was going snowboarding. So, yeah. This urban legend also is reminiscent of any of the ones that are cautionary tales against lovers' lanes, where two people go out and the guy with the hook follows them home, or the guy with the hook kills the boyfriend while he takes a pee. It's always while they're taking a pee. And, or it screeches down the side of the car and terrorizes the woman, and the guy comes back and the girl's like, "We gotta leave, there's someone out there," kind of thing, and they find the hook on their door handle when they get home. Those sorts of things, cautionary tales. Also true to life with the Zodiac killer, who definitely stalked lovers' lanes in this fashion and would have been that urban legend come to life.
Natalie's friends are going to assure her that she has been pranked. And it is going to settle her nerves. Now, she's got a good group of friends, like Brenda and Parker and Sasha, and they're just gonna say. And Parker, by the way, this old Michael Rosenbaum, who I'm a big fan of. He's the one that knows Damon the best, and not only that, but knows about all of these urban legends. And isn't it a little funny that all of these urban legends are seemingly coming true because Damon takes those classes, and Wexler does the same old urban legend lecture every single semester. And so all of these things conflate in order to convince Natalie that she's mistaken. And perhaps it's more easy for her to want to believe that. And things might seem okay, except for the fact that she is going to go about her more regular day of going home while her roommate, Tosh, has been attacked and is in the process of being attacked. This is very weird, but I will understand that because of Tosh's idea, or sorry, a behavior in the past, this seems to be old hat for this. And she's screaming and squealing and being choked out, which could mean sex to some people. And even one of her dorm mates walks past the door and says something to the effects of, "Looks like Elvira has got another one," or whatever the hell. It calls her Elvira. And Natalie, basically, as Tosh is getting murdered, goes to sleep. And basically, we arrive at the next morning having witnessed Tosh being strangled to death.
So sad. Such good acting, though. It's really, fraught and believable as far as fighting back against somebody who's overpowering you. It's sad and scary, but very well done. And unfortunately, we believe that she will just be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just going to go to bed. Nothing to see here. Sorry." Kind of weird, almost Canadian attitude toward walking in on people having sex and needing so badly to just go to bed in your bed. Like, I don't know, some people would just be like, turn on the light and be like, I'm sorry, you gotta go. I gotta sleep, guys. You gotta go somewhere else. Kick them out, put your foot down. But no, we have our little Molly Ringwald kind of just wanting to get by and be the peacemaker who goes to bed with her Walkman, a la B.A. Johnson, and wakes up to blood on the wall and a dead roommate. Like, devastating. This is the sort of thing, and maybe this is an urban legend too. Have you ever heard that if your roommate dies while you're in university, you get straight
I
A's?
have, thanks to the feature film Dead Man on Campus.
I know, right? All these urban legends have been ruined in a way because we know them all from films.
That's kind of my knowledge base for everything. Why do you know that, Wes? I saw it in a movie. That's probably where I'm going to tell you I got my information from, which is how I've been educated so abhorrently. But no, this has been staged as a suicide. And somebody said something rather crass to her body getting wheeled out by paramedics. Interesting. We have probably non campus paramedics that have come to retrieve a body and remove it from the property. But this is,
Oh, little do you know they have funerary services classes down the hall.
but she's been removed. And somebody, just like some random blonde, is like, don't worry, guys. She's looked like that for a while. Like, just that's fucked up.
Yep, and that is a sort of bullshit attitude that people who were, whether they were into metal or punk or goth in the 90s and 80s, got that sort of attitude. And, that's why we have the Sophie Lancaster Foundation for people who are othered, specifically of goth subcultures, and, want to speak out against violence because she was murdered simply for being a goth. And that's, not it tracks for me. It makes sense to me. That's the sort of bullshit that people would say, even if you're only vaguely slightly goth, instead of like very, uh, recognizable as a trad goth person, where she was sort of like in between that industrial goth rivet head and trad goth sort of look. Yeah, she would have definitely gotten that sort of attitude even in death.
And this only serves to raise Natalie's hackles, but at the same time, this is one of those sinister aspects where she's speaking to the dean and she's speaking to, like you said, that one counselor, this other teacher type character. And she is being told that this, like, aren't you glad you kept the lights off? It's just a very morbid suicide note from a very morbid young woman who, of course, they killed themselves. They were goth, they were depressed, they had issues, they were on lithium. And so, all these reasons and more, this is just an unfortunate circumstance. And Damon is pranking you and he's snowboarding, and your friend killed herself because she's goth.
Isn't that just disturbing? It wouldn't fly nowadays at all. For all the times that people look back at old films and say that they're not good or like they're problematic, that's a favorite word. When they have a shitty attitude about women or gays, now we have one here that is just against a goth person that, no, it's okay, it's understandable. Obviously, she killed herself. That's fucked up. That is deeply fucked up. But, we don't hear a lot of like lambasting or push for revisionist history when it comes to the treatment of goths, punks, and metalheads.
She is going to attempt to push this idea that something is going on campus. Now, thankfully, we have our intrepid reporter who, by the way, is going to be on her side. What is going on around here? He's looking for his big scoop. Now, I'm sure he cares on some level because, assumedly, you don't become an investigative journalist because you're going to get famous and win the Pulitzer. They say Pulitzer so many times. And I don't mean to be that person, but if you want a Pulitzer, start by pronouncing it correctly. But I'm just going to say, like, sometimes the worst thing that you can ever get is a correction on your pronunciation when you were in media. And I remember applying for a job in which I was going to be doing the news for some place in Barrie, Ontario, or somewhere. And they had gotten my package, but I had referred to Heathrow Station as Hethrow Station because I had never read the word before or I'd never heard the word before. And the only response back was, it's Heath, like Keith, not Heth. Thank you for your time. So yeah,
Wow.
so like that's how come maybe I'm such a stickler for pronouncing words correctly now. But no, Paul wants the Pulitzer, and he would. Sorry, but
That's
but
fine.
but he has been rattled lids because Dean Adams rather harshly brings up the fact that you're not really a reliable person at all because you killed somebody with reckless driving.
Yeah, pretty heartless. But hey, that's how investigative journalism works. It's tit for tat, quid pro quo, Clarice. Quid pro quo. I don't know where that was really coming from. But yeah, he's done his due diligence, and all it took was, calling around. That's, what we try and instill in journalism students, what I was instilled as a journalism student. Get off the fucking chair and out onto the streets, asking questions of human beings, having conversations with people, not researching stuff online. I mean, the next best thing, of course, is going to the library, which he did.
That's the real reason why journalism's dying is the younger generation doesn't want to make phone calls or go outside their house anymore.
It's exactly why journalism's dying. It has been lazy aggregate journalism because you're, writing stories or telling stories in whatever medium of choice based on other people's stories. I mean, there's a place for aggregate journalism for sure, like, news that's told in a digest form months later, or news that's told in an aggregate form like Google News, or Ground News is another one. Inkle News uses it too, where they tell one story that is pulled from many places to try and get what the fucking truth is. Or things like, there was, let's say, we'll make up like a natural disaster of some sort in X place. And this place says there's 50 survivors. This place says there's 20 dead. This place is saying that there's 14 still missing. So in there somewhere, you get an actual good idea of what's actually gone on, right? By the aggregate news. But yeah, that is and can be done by a computer nowadays. What you really need to get the initial story is somebody down there describing to you what they see. People say that it's ghoulish when they're, standing in front of the White House and there was, or even better, like standing in front of Congress in the US and describing like what different people are doing. Like, there's a group of people over here doing this. There's people still inside. There's police enforcement at the windows. And it's a lovely day here in Washington. However, and people would be like, it's weird of them to like juxtapose what other people are doing or note the weather, but it's like that's important because you need to put the person there and you need to have the context for our everyday. So it's not something that's happening on a movie. It's something that's happening here in our real world. So you need to like talk about, it was a windy day when so and so murdered such and such. You need to have some sort of painting of a picture, right? And you can't do that unless you're down there.
And that's how come Lydia taught journalism and why Paul should have attended some of her classes, although he does a fairly good job, but he's not going to get the big scoop that he's looking for, which I suppose Brenda will. But Natalie is going to explain to her friend what has been haunting her about the death of her friend Michelle. And that, dear listeners, is because collectively Those ladies are fucking maniacs.
They're a whole new episode of I Know What You Did Last Summer, aren't they?
They're even worse. So, this prank, this whatever you want to call it, initiation, it's wild. They're laughing and cackling and they're slowing down until a driver flashes their lights at him. Then they use that as an opportunity to drive behind him and effectively run him off the road. This backstory about getting this driver killed. He was young. I don't know why she adds that except for some flavor text, but she was like, he was our age. I was like, would you be less sad if he was an old man? Like, if you ran an old man off of the road, would you look at his wrecked vehicle and his mangled corpse and say, he had a good run, but it only affects you because a young person dying. I'm a young person. What if I died? Good thing I'm killing people instead.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me too. That, or if he was a student driver, would have been like, well, he should have taken that driver's ed course if he was like much younger. It is very strange. Like driving around as a teenager doing retarded things in cars, it happens. Not quite this broken headed though, because it is like, I don't know. Did she really kind of want to kill somebody? Typically, cheerleaders don't fall into that crowd.
It's hard to say, but it really puts Michelle in a different light. Now I don't feel so bad that she got decapitated because this is beyond, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, where a momentary distraction that was kind of understandable that resulted in
Mhm.
a manslaughter. That's different than Michelle cackling, keeping her thing locked. And as this person is swerving and running off the road, she's just getting more and more into it. And Natalie adding the line, I should have told her to stop, but I didn't. That doesn't really help. As you know, watching a horror film, ladies and gentlemen, and others who are listening, you know that while you're watching this sequence, this is important backstory. And you could probably suspect that this is more than just flavor text to talk about why she's upset that her friend is dead. This is going to be important backstory. And in my opinion, this is the weakest aspect of the storytelling because it throws into chaos any sort of logical narrative that I think would make sense for our ultimate killer's motivations. Now, Paul's initial thought seems to be the most logical, and I kind of wish that they went in this direction. But what he has discovered is that Wexler himself is the folklore professor who has a whole thing on urban legends. He himself is the sole survivor of the Stanley Hall massacre that occurred in good old 1973. We don't have quite as much microfiche as I would like, but still, we get this important bit of backstory. And this is going to cause Natalie and Paul to do a little bit of sleuthing on their own. And it's going to take them into an absolutely gorgeous office of Professor Wexler, the office that I think that anyone would want if you were to ever imagine yourself as a professor at a university.
Which is a far cry from the broom closets that they typically inhabit. I've seen some interesting offices at the Media and Design School in Algonquin, and they don't look anything like this at all. And they don't have secret rooms either. Like, hello, what I want is an office like this. This is more like Hogwarts level of dean's office, or like he's not even a dean, he's just a professor's office. And it's very cute that it's so very boiled in university culture where they're like, well, he should be here, it's his office hours. And they just go on in, kind of thing. Well, they break in, but I really do like this very wooden mahogany polished. You can smell the wood polish and leather in this place. And he's, of course, got all kinds of things like old African masks and such because he's a folklore professor after all.
So much little accoutrement. It reminds me of what Sherlock Holmes's study would look like. The just everything is from a case, everything is an example. He uses all of he's like a prop comic. He uses all of this stuff to demonstrate his lessons. Why he has a blue parka and a shiny brand new axe? Don't worry about it. Don't you worry about that part. But he is going to pinch them, and this is going to put them in some monstrously hot water, even though that they believe that they're onto something. But the dean has had enough. We are not going to pursue any of this. We are getting out of here. He is going to discuss this with Reese, and it's basically shutting everything down. Reese is becoming suspicious herself, but he basically is giving her orders and saying that they're not involving the police, and he's getting the fuck out of here, and we're done with all this kind of stuff. And this is probably my favorite murder in the entire film. This is so good, and in a slasher film that is quite devoid of gore, to its detriment in some aspects, because some of the editing and like, listen, it's just a little sloppy in certain deaths. But in this particular death, the dean getting his Achilles tendon cut and then hit into those tire spikes and that delicious little puncture of the severe tire damage sign is so well done, and I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty unique. I always like an Achilles tendon slash, thanks to Pet Cemetery. I don't know what it is about me as a kid. I was terrified of getting my Achilles tendon slashed even before Pet Cemetery was a thing. And I'd have to rewatch it. Not that I haven't seen it like 3 or 4 times in my life, but Trilogy of Terror. Does Karen Black get her Achilles tendon cut by the little doll that's running around after her? Because that might explain why I thought there'd be like someone with a knife in a vent that would kill people by slashing their Achilles tendon. I thought that as a kid. So Achilles tendon trauma has always bothered me. I like that it takes it another step. It's not just, slash the Achilles tendon, let the person crawl around and then kill them. They kill them with a vehicular manslaughter par excellence. I really do. I really do like this murder.
It's so good, and that spike seems so nasty, and that's the end of our crusty, bitter old dean. And we are going to now head to a party. By the way, Lids, you might be interested to know that this particular frat party just so happens to be falling on the anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the Stanley Hall massacre.
I know, right? It's like they planned it, you know? I wonder if this happens every year and only a few people die. So we have to blame our red herring, right? They do go back to his office and find it covered in blood. So that's got to be staged, right? Because that's what our red herring would do. Now, I wouldn't like the story to go in this direction because it's just so very predictable at that point. If he is some sort of, you know, Michael Myers kind of resurrecting every 25 years or like been teaching for 10 of those 25 years and just having a folklore class to drive home the point and make it all that more interesting when he does snap 25 years later and kill everyone. So it wouldn't have worked for me. I like the way that the film goes at this point because we realize that Wexler is the sole survivor of that thanks to a newspaper article found by Paul, who's now off the paper. So now he's rogue. He's a broken arrow investigative journalist, the
That's
best
right.
kind.
It's like the ultimate journalistic fantasy. It's weird that he disappears for such a huge portion of the film up to this point. But what we have here is our party, and they've got a dog. They've got Parker. They've got Sasha that she can't really hang out there for too much longer because she does have a radio show. And Natalie, who has just heard about her friend getting killed, has now she thinks been pranked by Damon. We don't know. That was pretty traumatic. Her roommate has committed suicide. That we do know for sure. And also there is a lot of drama just going on in general with her. But don't you worry, don't you fret, because her friend Brenda tells her to chill out, and everyone's always handing her a beer and telling her to relax. And she's always so enthusiastic when people offer her alcohol. It's like, no matter what the situation, do you want a beer? Yeah. So now we have our party, and Parker is going to, when Sasha leaves them, Parker is going to insist that this is Damon. I know the guy, okay? This is absolutely fucking ridiculous. It's going to be completely fine. Meanwhile, Paul has made it back to the party and has also started to console Natalie, and they kiss. And by the way, this is like a weird subplot with her friend Brenda, who has a thing for Paul. It kind of comes in and out. She doesn't mention it too much, but she does make this point that if Paul's going to be at the party, that maybe a certain blue-eyed journalist would be interested in her. And Natalie fucking smooches them after they have a long and intimate conversation. And it just so happens that Brenda walks in with 2 beers. And that is where everything goes awry. Now it is Dawson's Creek. Now it is the OC. It's people at a frat party kissing people that they probably shouldn't. Stress, people walking out of parties, the cherry poppin' daddies. I have to listen to Zoot Suit Riot in 2025. Can't believe it.
I don't know. Back in the day when people were having the swing music revival, we had Stray Cat Strut at least, and that was a good song and still is. I don't know this Suit Riot song. I've listened to it and I didn't recognize it. It's all new to me. I just must have tuned it out because I was like, it's Stray Cat Strut or nothing, man.
I could not tune it out, and I hadn't thought about that song in a really long time. And just again, when you revisit some of these films, this film itself is such a time capsule, more so, and I'll reemphasize this, than any of the other films that we have covered. Because I Know What You Did Last Summer feels like it could have taken place literally any time. And the same with The Faculty, with a few exceptions of some dated graphics in The Faculty, that film could have come out literally whenever. And the same with I Know What You
Yeah.
Did Last Summer. And even though Scream has kind of a funny reliance on what would be considered outlandish technology, that film, by the way, that it described quite accurately by Kendall Phillips in Projected Fears. He has a chapter on Scream in which he talks about how that movie really is a big, it's boomers versus Gen X, and how much Gen X was acclimatized to technology. But the way that they talk about cell phones as if they're magical devices, Sydney calling 911 on her PC, which seems like the least efficient way to possibly call 911. This film takes the cake, in my opinion, from just seeming so of its time, right smack dab in 1998, because the film was like conceived, completed, edited, and released all within that time period, like all within the span of just 13 weeks or whatever. So it was really quite remarkable when you think about what a snippet of time this actually is. And we are going to be moving on to dispatching some of our other characters. This is conveniently a weird bit of information in which they're listening to like a woman screaming and somebody saying that the radio is playing legitimate screams from an actual crime, but it's only part of the music, so not to get worried, because Sasha is going to go back to her radio program, and then her producer is going to get murdered, and then she in turn going to get murdered. The weird thing about this entire sequence of events is how it's edited, because simultaneously Parker is going to get the screws to him. And my question is you start to wonder, are they doing a double killer? Because it seems as though I don't know how far away that radio station is, but it seems as though our parka killer is in two places at once.
It does, and it's got to be very close. And it's all done in the editing, and it is very confusing and a little too close. But you can see how they would have just made it, maybe because they've already microwaved the dog, which only took a second. That's in the trailer too. It's really really kind of warped scene to be in the trailer, but it would have been the attention getter because it was the stinger at the end of the trailer, where this is the one where the lady drives the cat in the microwave or something, and they open the microwave in the trailer to like smash cut to black, and it's very effective, but it kind of loses its punch because it's happening at a time where there's a lot more happening, and seconds later he's getting Dranoed, for crying out loud, which is very gross and very like a very intense scene, especially to have a big strapping dude overpowered by the killer at this point. We've had a few like false starts of like Brenda swimming and having another girl approach her wearing a parka, and we think that she's going to get killed. So we have had the friend screaming behind glass to try and save the person. It turns out to be not the killer, so it just proves that Natalie's too high strung. And then we get the opposite of that with Natalie screaming at Sasha, who's behind glass with a killer. Like it's a juxtaposed scene. So it's doing a heck of a lot while we've just had this sort of double kill, if you count the dog as a murder, which I do, right? Like, and it's just grotesque too. So it's like some very, very grotesque stuff happening that could have happened just moments ago, yes. And the radio station has to be very close because Sasha got to it very quickly, going straight from the party and, chugging beer or whatever, straight to the show within moments. So it's very, very close because they are still on campus.
Yeah, that's very true. It all does just take place on the campus. The dog is really funny because it's such a cute little dog. Like and it's doing like a funnel, so they're it's really like you're watching some sort of fraternity movie. Like we're like, hey, isn't it funny that we're getting the dog drunk? Ha ha ha. And
yes, sir. Spuds McKenzie party dog.
Well, it's like, but and then you would almost think that the turn that Parker makes, thinking the beeper says Damon, he thinks this killer on the phone. Where have we seen this before? We would think that he is joking. But he turns the second that he feels like his dog is in danger. That's when he's like, you son of a bitch. And you think, oh, this is going to be a fake out. He's just fucking with him. No, he nuked that dog and it exploded. And you'd have to think, okay, so in a big party with lots of people, although conveniently, by the time all this sequence is edited, it seems like there's no one left in the party. But this big party that, he had his confrontation with Paul. Paul says that everyone should go home. Parker basically says that he's full of shit and he's just goosing this story because he wants to like get that scoop. He wants to have that Pulitzer. He doesn't want to just end up, writing articles for Martha Stewart magazine. There's another,
which I mean would be a dream job, but whatever. Okay, frame it how you like.
Absolutely. And so, and then it just caps off with that Drano death, no pun intended. But Sasha's death is edited in such a way. I appreciate how long they drag this out. There is a little bit more stalk and slash that's going on in this as Sasha attempts to run for her life. But the weird way in which they edit it, it made it seem as if the killer didn't really kill her. And so you would think that, oh, is Sasha in on this? Is this, again, going back to, since this film is reminiscent of Scream, are we doing a double killer? Sorry to spoil Scream after all these years. But we get also a little bit of personality with our killer. we get a finger wave. This is the first time that we've seen the killer do anything other than act like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees.
Mhm. And it also just is a taunting thing. Like, are we going to take this as, I know you and you know me, so this is the hint that I'm waving at my friend, so to speak? Or is it you're next? Sort of like, ta ta, see you at the next murder I commit, the murder of you. Ha ha. So it is a little bit of, you know, personality, as you say, but can't be ascribed to any particular type of person.
Now, lids. We have a situation in which our trio of heroes is banding together because Paul has a theory. People are dropping like flies, but it's gotta be Wexler. More than anybody, he's the person that has all of this motivation, and he convinces Natalie and Brenda that this is probably the case. And they all head out together to get help. They can't find anybody. They can't find the dean. They can't find any of their friends. It's time to, I don't know, call the police.
Oh, actual police or just Reese?
Well, Reese would be at least a good start. Now, while they're in the vehicle together, Brenda and Natalie are able to talk a little bit. And Brenda is saying that, you know what? She's sorry about how she reacted with Paul. And they would be good together. And man, does Natalie just perk right up again. She's into that idea. I keep thinking, I was like, don't you have something better to worry about right now than if your friend thinks that it would be good if you and Paul were to get together? You're literally on the run from a murderer who's trying to kill you. And they also keep mentioning a funny smell. Now, we are going to learn the source of that smell is Wexler himself. And so the blood that Reese had discovered was indeed real, and it was likely Wexler's because it was in his office that she was slipping and sliding all over that stuff. And now we are running out of suspects, although they suspect that the dude that's off at a gas station making a phone call might be the killer. And so they run away and become separated in the woods. But don't you worry, don't you fret. We're not out of red herrings because there's been a creepy janitor this entire time.
I know, Julian Richings. And you want to talk about really great character actors who actually hangs out from time to time at a coffee shop near us and does like a local appearance. Like, it's not just that he goes to that coffee shop. He goes to that coffee shop and they advertise like Julian Richings is going to be in the coffee shop in Stittsville for like this afternoon. So come on by, hang out with this icon. And he is a Canadian icon, but yeah, he is just another red herring. And he doesn't really give too much information other than you want to know about Stanley Hall? Better ask Wexler.
It's really interesting how you can get the sense that this is one of the falsest, readiest red herrings that could possibly exist in this film. At no point am I ever convinced that, but we've already, are we supposed to believe that Brad Dourif was the killer? It's like, no way, even though he's gone missing somehow. I remember that news report, they have that picture of him that's not so much of a stock photo, but like a headshot. It's like, I was like, where did we get this character's glossy 8x10s? And we learned probably that he wanted to be an actor, because why else would you have such beautiful photos of you just like that is available for the police? But I digress.
I think Robert Englund's headshot from earlier, from like Dead and Buried, is like what they use in the newspaper of him too.
I think so too. It's really good. It's really good. A very young man.
I like that Paul is being sort of painted here as a yet another red herring, because he was trying to get them secluded, trying to get them away from campus, trying to, like, I don't know, get them together somehow and get them distracted. And he had that body in his vehicle or whatever. So, like, they do a good job of making it seem like he's involved as well. So everyone's a suspect except these two girls, right? Right?
You would think so. This whodunit aspect to the slasher is something that had been slightly lost over time. And this can seem like a hallmark of these late 90s slasher films, but really they're a hallmark of the earliest slasher cycles that were happening. This is your giallo, this is your proto slasher, and many of the slashers that were coming out into the 1980s were also like this during the golden era of slashers. But at some point, slashers became synonymous with almost like superheroes. It was Michael, it was Jason, it was Freddy. It was never a question about who the killers were supposed to be. And when they tried to do whodunit killers, it seems to be the least popular iterations of those films. So you have this was really back to basics. And one of the things that I've noticed quite heavily as we've revisited the 90s was how this really was kind of old school, in the sense that we were really, really focusing on who the killers might be. And when we're reeling into our final act of this film, they're just pulling you in so many different directions. The scene with the janitor is almost comical with how suspicious he's all of a sudden acting. Like, you can't, like, he seems so like mildly bothered and confused that she's afraid of him, yet he's not attempting to calm her down at all. In fact, he finds it amusing that she is trying to barrel herself out of a moving vehicle. He can't open the door from the inside. First of all, that's psychotic. That's how you're supposed to open doors. Second of all, why are you not attempting to calm this person down whatsoever? It doesn't necessarily matter, because again, this film, for a film that is not incredibly violent, what a mighty body count. Yet another person falls in a car accident as they're pursued down the road by someone flashing their high beams.
Isn't it delicious? Isn't it just delicious? I think, you could look at it and be like, it's campy. They're throwing too many red herrings around. Yeah, it is kind of, but it is written fairly well. It takes itself seriously at this point. And of course, finding yourself in Stanley Hall is just the culmination of all of the urban legends on this campus, right? So I really like that they've incorporated that almost 3 times a charm for the high beams killer kind of thing, and also take us back home to new urban legend that isn't really an urban legend at all.
When we enter Stanley Hall, it is a theater of horrors, and we are going to have bodies coming out of everywhere. People that we thought we weren't going to see again, like Damon, and she has made her way to a filthy looking mattress that has the body of Brenda. And she laments her dead friend, and she doesn't know what to do. Paul is likely the killer. We're not sure
at this point, unless Wexler was playing dad in the back of the car, which was a thought I had when I first watched this. But yeah, you start to really doubt it's even anyone you know at this point.
Exactly, until Brenda arises. And I want to take a minute here to talk about Rebecca Gayheart. So she was known quite well for the series of Nugzima commercials. I remember those commercials when I was a kid. And of course, she was on Beverly Hills 90210. Now, this was a role that she wanted bad. She auditioned her ass off to get it, and she did end up beating out everyone else to get the role. And this is probably not her fault. I find her performance in this so weird. It's so turning on a dime. Like, I'm crazy now. It very much reminds me of the problem with a lot of the final scenes involving the Scream killers, where all of a sudden they're not just maniacs. They are dialed up to 11 chittering cartoon villains.
I have a slight problem with Pamela Voorhees in the same way, where she can be calm, cool, and collected for the whole thing while she's committing murders. Spoiler for Friday the 13th. If you didn't know, it was Pamela all along. And then she's a seething maniac all of a sudden who can hardly keep her shit together and fucking hallucinates. So, like, I don't like it either. I don't like it either. Yet I do love her performance because she rides that line between kind of perky, airheaded, typical girl and seething maniac so perfectly well that you can still see the personality traits of either in both guises. And I love this performance.
It, to me, there's I just wish that she had been reined in there's a couple of line readings that are cringy to me. I find it kind of cringy. I love her wild hair. Did you know that this was a massive part of conversation? Originally people wanted to straighten out her hair, and then until she reminded them, do you know how long that's going to take every single day to straighten out my hair? And so they ended up going with her natural curls, and then the blown out curls where she is just like, it's all over the place, and it does really contribute to.
All you need to do to get that is to brush it, and then you get Medusa. It's great.
And so here's where she's at, gang, if you wanted to know, and I know you do, is that the young man driving on that road that one fateful night where her, Natalie, and Michelle were driving behind them, flashing their high beams, and ended up killing this boy, was, of course, her boyfriend. They were going to be married. He just was not able to afford a ring just yet, and so gave me this. It's a little trinket she wore around the neck, but she pulls off in a way that people do in movies where they're done wearing something around their neck. They pull things off, and you wonder, do you just retie that every time, or what do you do? But so this is what has happened. Now, this doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't understand. This doesn't ruin the movie. I like this movie. Let me be clear. But why would Natalie be the last person you kill when she's not driving the car? Why did you kill Tosh? Why did you kill all of these other people? They literally had nothing to do with it. None of them know who Michelle is. You're basically two friends who went to a different high school, went to a campus where no one was involved, and then you just started killing people around her, and the person you saved for last was the person who wasn't even driving the vehicle. I could say that this is a slasher film and you have had a psychotic break and you have become violent and you have now become addicted to killing people and all this, that, and the other thing. If this is the reason why you were committing these crimes, the person driving the vehicle is the last person you killed. So you have a choice. Either Michelle is your final girl, or you make Natalie the person who was driving the car. Tell her what really happened and tell the story again like an urban legend, but now tell it correctly. What was really happening, what Brenda knew that Natalie wouldn't admit, was that Natalie was driving the car the whole time, and she was lying about that story so no one thought she was a bad person.
Which would have made a lot more sense and tracks with my idea that she's only killing everyone around her because she had something taken from her, and it's that torture. It's a little more selfish revenge story. It's not just like eye for an eye. It's I've had to be tortured with the death of my boyfriend, so now you will be tortured with the deaths of those around you that you care about. Although she doesn't kill the one person that she was kissing, but hey, okay, whatever. That's a new development, though. So she gets a pass there. It would have made a lot more sense.
It doesn't ruin anything. It's just curious that, especially when you find out that this was a first time scriptwriter, and to me, this is a plot point that just got missed. I just think that if you had a seasoned writer look at something, but apparently they did have a seasoned writer look at it. The person who wrote A Single White Female, I can't remember their name, but he was the person that did a look-see over in this, and all apparently he did was add more jokes to the script. And he just said,
oh, good. That's what we needed, more jokes.
Well, yeah, there's some funny stuff, but this is where she's at. Now, Reese is going to come to the rescue. No, she gets shot a bunch. And now it's going to be up to Jared Leto. Jesus himself is going to show up and try to do the old switcheroo. Now, Brenda does have a bit of an idea in which she is going to kill Natalie and then through this tragedy get closer to Paul, and then literally Paul walks into the room and then tries to pull a fast one on her and say that I love this plan. We're going to be such a hot couple. But Brenda,
Yeah.
Brenda's not convinced. And she instantaneously goes from we're going to be together to actually, I'm just going to shoot you both, which will result in who she's going to kill first. Reese, we think is dead, is going to get off a shot on Brenda. Brenda, by the way, stabbed her with a switchblade. Very cool. I like that Kubrick stare with the forehead and the wild hair. She looks very menacing. It's cool. And so we are going to then shove this person out of the window. Now, Liz, I have a question for you. They go check on Reese, and then they get in a car and leave.
Well, they still have to get off campus, right? Isn't that the whole thing? The whole plan was get off campus and find someone who cares, call the real police, not just the Reese police.
Yeah, like, is Reese going to be okay? Reese is going to be just fine. Where are you driving to? What the fuck?
Why not take Reese with you to a hospital? That would be helpful instead of just leaving her up there bleeding out.
This is fucked up. It's like to the point in which I rewound the film because I thought I had missed something. What the fuck happened where they're all of a sudden in a car? This to me is just this idea of you needing a scene change. And we're back to our original little plot point. Somebody is in the back seat and Brenda is going to go for one last hurrah because bullets will not stop her. And she is going to fall victim to what seems to be how these late 90s slashers like to end things, by having a character unconvincingly fall in water.
Unconvincing, and bonus points for smashing a car and having them shoot through the windshield like they're made of a greased pig. So yeah, we know that she's going to come back. That's what she does. We also, if you were holding out hope for Alicia Witt being your final girl, for real final girl, she's not, because she had an assist from Jared Leto's character and Paul. So it's not even truly a final girl character, unless you count Brenda, who is the final girl in the river who has survived college, sort of, if you think she's alive, which I do. But and we find out shortly that she did. Part of me, it's not even a fun final girl story, where it could have been neat without Paul in that end scene whatsoever, to just have the two girls facing off and even have a little bit of Reese. And I'm not even a hyper feminist in that way, and I'm not saying that it's bad because there's a presence of a man ruining the final girl moment. It just seems like it would have been even more powerful had he not been there at all.
There's something very strange about this trio of slashers that we have been discussing on and off throughout the course of this episode. Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and this. And if I were to put up the trinity of late 90s slashers, it would be these ones. There are, of course, other ones, but these ones are by far the most famous. And all of them, I think, were subverting convention as far as they were concerned by having so many survivors. Scream has so many surviving characters from that initial movie. Randy, Courtney Cox's character, Sydney, they all survive. And then you also have, and I know, you have two survivors. And if you think about who are actually involved in the crimes, only two people who were involved in the crime were killed. You have 4 teens, 50% of them lived. Then, and also, Jennifer Love Hewitt character did not dispatch the fisherman on his own. In fact, it was Freddie Prinze Jr. So this is, again, the same thing, where you don't really have a final girl, which, by the way, I'm not saying a slasher needs to. All I'm saying is it's just interesting that these films all came out so close to each other. And even though they were biting each other's style, they never went back to core principles. One survivor. The boyfriend dies. The boyfriend dies horrifically. It is not there to fucking help you. They're there to basically be a momentary distraction while the real killer and the real final girl have their final moment together. But if you include Reese, there's all kinds of people living through this film.
It's true. And maybe at the time thinking, yes, they're subverting the paradigm of slasher films at the time, but it sort of does ruin the moment, doesn't it, to have a sort of threesome at the end of survivors who are all involved in the dispatching of the killer who doesn't fucking die. I did like that ending. I like the ending of this, where we cut to a college campus, a little room like a cafe, not unlike the beginning of the film, where everyone's on a ritzy couch and they're telling urban legend stories, and that's not really how it happened. The Stanley Hall massacre or the murder of all the students at Pendleton earlier. And we have that one student who's going to be that little know-it-all who says, that's not really how it happened. Let me tell you how it happened. And of course, it's Brenda. I loved that. I thought that was so cool when I first watched it. I still think it's pretty cool. But when I first watched it, I was just like, now that is subverting the trope. Now that is doing something interesting. It's not just having the killer come back somehow question mark in the sequel. It's having the killer come back at the end of that first film. And wow, there could have never been another urban legend film, and it would have just been a perfect setup to me.
Ending a story like this, in which Brenda the killer is in control of the narrative, is a really interesting aspect to this story. And I agree with you. I think that this ending is pitch perfect for the kind of story that they were telling. And I was kidding Rebecca Gayheart pretty hard in her performance as the killer. I don't hate it. All I'm saying is it was very big. It was very, very big. But she went for it and she was working her ass off. And I think giving her the final word in this is actually quite great and does kind of make the character of Natalie and Paul kind of forgettable because they're so bland in a lot of ways that I think that Brenda really gets with that third act performance, and then she gets the final word. This is the person that I remember the most from this movie.
Michelle, the girl that gets killed at the beginning. They're the most memorable characters in this whole thing.
And of course, I'll never forget Tosh, because Goth for Goth is great.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And just like Professor Wexler, she's hardly in the fucking movie.
I have something that I want to say that I have learned, Lydia, because today his name is Wesley and today is my birthday. And I'm feeling, and I was thinking about this as I was sitting on urban legend, and we have spent time with the faculty, and we have spent time with I Know What You Did Last Summer, and we are about to leave the lovely decade of the 1990s. Getting more like an unsung decade, except for a few select films, but I feel like is getting more respect day by day. And I have come to this conclusion, and I'm going to try to say something nice about Scream. You've heard it here first.
Whoa. Okay. Hold on to your butts.
Carl Laemmle Jr. in the 1930s started horror in film as a genre. And that was, of course, working off of the backs of people like Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley. And then Val Lewton carried that into the 1940s and showed us how horror could be more contemporary, more subtle, more psychological kinds of stories. And then we saw what amazing directors like Alfred Hitchcock could do with horror in the 1960s. People like William Castle in the 1950s trying to bring people back to the theater by making it fun for the audiences and changing horror in that way. And then the shot across the bow in 1968 with Night of the Living Dead, then Rosemary's Baby. And then again in the 1970s, Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter changed the world of horror for all time with the Texas Chainsaw and with Halloween. And that carries us all the way to 1996, where Scream released that film. And what I will say about Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven and all the people involved in that film is the one thing we heard over and over and over again while discussing all of these other great films is this film got made because of Scream. That is what they said about The Faculty. That is what they said about Urban Legend. That is what they said about I Know What You Did Last Summer. And that is to say nothing of all of the other horror films that we haven't discussed during the late stages of this decade and into the early 2000s. And so what I will say for Scream is, like it or not, all of these other incredible horror films that I may like more and have more nice things to say about, and the filmmakers who made those films, like it or not, I can no longer deny the historical significance of Scream.
You know, there's and genres full of films that were made in the 2000s, not directly because Scream was made, but because horror itself was on top of mind for a lot of producers because of what you just said. And it's true. As much as we'd like to deny it, we're the Scream deniers, I guess, Wes, because I've never attributed the resurgence of the horror genre to that film because I maintained that it had not died. But there is a whole other subgenre that came out of that film, of course, which makes a lot of sense. And as we've talked about before, there was a resurgence in horror. People are trying to make money because Scream did so well. This film did very well. It almost made all of its money back in its opening weekend, from what I understand. So there was money to be made in all of this. Sure, that drives a lot of people, but it also gives a lot of work to first-time screenwriters, as it did here.
Mm-hmm. First-time screenwriters, little-known production companies, first-time producer on this film, first-time director, who, by the way, got the job by cutting together a fake trailer for I Know What You Did Last Summer with his friends. So, you know, all of these things. And I think the problem with being horror experts like you are, and I am, is we know so many horror films. It's ridiculous to say that one horror did this film and one horror did that because, what about this movie? What about this movie? What about this movie? But none of that matters because, as Alexandra West rightfully points out, this brought everything to the mainstream and put big money and serious focus on types of films that were predominantly B horror films with very small budgets. And that is the theme again and again with Dracula, with Psycho, with Cat People, with Texas Chainsaw. These were all small films that showed people that you can make a lot of money doing very big things, and then all of a sudden entire industries are born. And it seems that Hollywood needs to be reminded every decade that there's gold in them thar hills.
We are not doing The Hills Have Eyes, if that's what you're thinking that we're doing next. But yeah, well said, well said. I know that we had the Netflix boom with all of the Stephen King adaptations that seemed to convince people of that as well. And maybe we're heading into another one with this post-pandemic. The post-pandemic films are hitting now, people. So we're getting to see the things that were planned or filmed or stopped filming during the 2000s. So we're going to have a whole other cycle, the Wi-Fi cycle, as they're coining it, the virus film cycle.
So what do we got next for them?
Coming up next, we're going to go back in time a little bit, because this horror cycle, great as it is, and it leads us to the 2000s and beyond, we kept being reminded of older films. And in honor of Wes's birthday, we're going to do the 1981 hit Happy Birthday to Me. And I like being able to go back 10 years. I'm kind of sick of pagers and internet goth for goth. What is that? I want to go back to where it all started with real slashers, Wes.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. I've been wanting to do this film for a really long time. Fun fact, it's kind of the film that when everyone else has a birthday, I like to send them the full trailer to Happy Birthday to Me. I don't know why I started doing it, but it's like, be careful of the senior class snobs. It's a good time.
All this time spent on campus, I think I just want to go back there, so we'll stay there. I like this. I like this as a choice. It's technically a West pick, but I sort of engineered that choice. So yeah, happy birthday, Wes, and I hope that you enjoyed talking about Scream for your birthday.
I did, because I was thinking about it, working on my birthday. I just got off of work, and then it's time to do a podcast. But I like you guys, and if there's one thing that I like to do with my free time is spend it with you, Lydia, my dearest of friends, and of course you, all the listeners, as I get ever so closer to death.
And then we have a little Freddy Krueger waving at you. Sweet dreams, Wes. Yeah, well, happy birthday. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night. And thank you for hanging out on your birthday of all days with us at Dead Air.
It's no place I would rather be. I'm Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.